Right here. Check.
Yeah, can you hear all right?
Oh boy.
Okay.
Yeah, now we're cooking.
Play paranoid.
What's the net called? Goss.
Come on up, sit up here, y'all.
How does that, Chris, how does that go to turn this down?
He's the one controlling.
Okay.
JT's the sound man.
Okay.
Let's see how that's.
Right again. How's this? Is that better?
Just fine.
That all right? I'm back to the room?
All right, great.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. Well, as you heard earlier today, my name is Jerry Lomshek, and I'm a local historian here in this area. Before I start to introduce the speakers for this session, I want to give you just a little bit of information, and then I'll pass it on to them. First of all, you have not had a formal welcome to the Kansas Balkans, and so I want to be here to welcome you to the Kansas Balkans, and then you understand a little bit about what that means. Kansas Balkans is really made up of Cherokee and Crawford County here in southeast Kansas. And as Linda said earlier, Ed Brinkerhoff, who was the local editor of the Pittsburg paper here, said that you won't find us on a map, but if you look in Kansas history, you can't miss us. Actually, the name started during World War I. And as we know, the war started in Bosnia with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and with the turmoil there in the Balkans. That's what inspired us being named after that. It was not because we had people here that was mining from the Balkans, it was because of the turmoil of World War I when it started. And so the Kansas governor, in the middle of that, we were all kinds of strikes going on down here, and a lot of controversy was all over our history here in southeast Kansas. And he referred to us then as the Balkans of Kansas. And that was an insult. That was put out as an insult. We took it in pride, okay, and have ever since then. This area is unique in Kansas. It's unique geographically, historically, culturally, and politically. And because of that, we've been kind of ignored by the rest of the state because of that uniqueness. We are diverse, we're colorful, we're controversial, and we're fiercely independent. And I might add too, as you noticed from Linda's talk this morning, we are not known for passive women. Want to just do a brief overview of coal mining here in southeast Kansas, and everybody's touched on that in the last 2 days, but I kind of just do a little overview of that. Kansas coal mining was in 4 main districts in the state. In Leavenworth County, as you heard earlier, that was the earliest mines that were dug in the state of Kansas. And later on, primarily those who were worked by the prisoners in the federal and state prisons at Leavenworth. There's another coal mining area in Osage County, just south of Topeka, and that was earlier than it was here in this area. Then there was the smallest coal mining area was in Lynn County up by Pleasanton. And then there was the coal fields here. They're either referred to as the Cherokee Crawford coal fields or the Weir in Pittsburg. Either term can be used. We were the largest of the coal fields and coal areas in Kansas. It constituted the east half of Crawford County and the north half of Cherokee County. Coal was first discovered here by a government surveying party in 1839 at the outcropping. You look at this map, and you'll see this map in a number of different places. You'll notice there along the right-hand side, in that darker line going through there, that was where the outcropping of this coal field took place. It actually came to the surface. And so that's where they first found that there was coal in the area. However, the Native Americans had used that coal before white man came here. So it dates back to who knows when. The first mining began along that outcropping in the 1850s, and there was a lot of Missourians came over across the state line and took coal out of the creek beds and areas where that outcropping occurred there along where that line is. There was three types of mining in this area. It was strip mining, and that was the earliest part, and that took place there along that outcropping. And it was called coal banks, and that was worked with horses and mules just from the surface. And then later on, it became mechanical, and that went into the major strip mining industry that we had later on. After that, there was slope mines, and that was also to the eastern part of the fields, and it was where they could just start to mine down from the surface in a slope following that seam. That seam from the surface would go down to the west, so the farther west you went, the deeper that coal seam was. And then the last and other major type of mining was the deep shaft. At one time, we produced 1/3 of the coal in the country. Strip mining began early, like I said, with the horses and mules, and then beginning in about 1910, it became more mechanical with steam shovels and drag lines and that type of thing. That in the deep mines, the first deep mine that was sunk in these coal fields was at Scammon in 1874. And the first one in Crawford County was sunk here in Pittsburg in 1877. With that, in the 1880s, it really became our boom period here, and that industry really began to flourish. It would continue to be a major industry here till it peaked out in about 1915, and then because of the mechanical strip mining, beginning in about 1910, strip mining would continue to increase and the deep mines would continue to decrease while that was going on. That shaft mine continued into the 1930s, and then I think the last one closed in the 1960s, but there was hardly anything after the 30s. And so with that, there was a lot less demand for coal miners in the area, and you saw a major exodus from this area, and it has affected us ever since. Whereas, I don't know if you heard earlier, we became one of the poorer areas in the state of Kansas because of that. The demand for miners brought in a large number of immigrants, as you've heard a number of times. Half of the miners here were foreign-born. At one time, those of you that were on the tour will note that we had a steamship ticket office here in Pittsburgh, and it's still, the building is still there where that happened. You can imagine that in the plains of Kansas, you would have a steamship ticket office. Coal was needed for the railroads, especially, and so because of that, the railroad companies were a great owner in major coal companies here in this area. Coal was also needed for manufacturing and also for home use. Zinc mining that we heard about last night and this morning, and in southern Cherokee County and into Missouri and Oklahoma, brought here, that ore was brought here for smelting because it was cheaper to bring the ore here to be smelted than it was to take it down where that ore was and take the coal to that area. So the smelting here in Pittsburgh began in 1878, so it was pretty early. We estimate that there was 290 major coal shafts here in the coal fields here in this area, averaging about 1 per square mile across the coal fields. And in addition to those 290, there was also a number of dinky mines that we had no idea how many of those were. But it's where a family might decide just to sink their own mine and be in little small operations, and there was a lot of those across the coal field. Some of these large gold mines would employ up to 400 men at a time, and the excavations underground could end up being over a 1 square mile. Some of the maps that we have show it extending past 1 square mile. Because of the transportation problems, the coal camps developed around the mines so that the miners didn't have far to go to work. And the coal companies would foster that by building company houses and bringing the miners right there close to their work. There was over 100 coal camps in this area, and virtually every community in this area that's in existence today was previously a coal camp, including Pittsburg. Those coal camps would have, like I said, be made up of company houses. There would be company stores that the coal company owned. There would be churches and schools and that type of thing. Unionization of the mines occurred in 1892, starting in 1892, and you'll hear more about some of that, with major strikes in 1893 and 1899. Multiple other strikes, including the one that Linda talked about with Amazon early in 1921. There were connections from here with all other areas in Kansas that had coal mines, but we also had connections here with coal mines in northeast Missouri, Moberly, and northwest Arkansas, east central Oklahoma, and central Illinois, because some of the coal companies also had mines in those areas. And I've done a lot of research on this, and you'll see that those miners would tend to drift from one place to another, throughout all of those areas. The impact of coal mining, the coal mining area and the immigration into this area is certainly felt in this area today. So I hope that gives you just a little broad overview of coal mining here in southeast Kansas. So we'll go on with talks for the rest of this session. And first I want to introduce to you Seth Nutt. Seth is the director of the Frontinac Library and Heritage Hall Museum at Frontinac. And many of you that was on the tour visited that yesterday. And that museum, I think, is a real showpiece. Seth has a teaching background and has been instrumental in preserving and educating Southeast Kansas history. And he'll give an introduction to the Heritage Hall Museum, of which he was instrumental in forming that and bringing that to fruition. So please welcome Seth Nutt.
Okay, so I'm one that likes to wander, so I'm probably going to take this out and walk around a little bit instead of staying put. Thank you, Jerry, for the nice introduction. My name is Seth. I'm the director of the Frontinac Library and Heritage Hall Museum, which is Crawford County's newest historical museum. And we're really proud to be hosting you guys here. It really means a lot to us to have such a nice representation from across the United States coming here to Southeast Kansas to learn about our history. So a little bit about our museum. How many of you were on the tour yesterday? Okay, so majority of you. For those of you that didn't get to come in, I hope that you either have an opportunity while you're here during the conference to come in and see us, or make a trip back here to Southeast Kansas. With us being the newest museum, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of the history and how this came to be. In late 2019, the city of Frontinac was notified that it would be receiving upwards of $4.6 million under the understanding that we were to use 100% of the funds to to build Frontinac's first ever library complex. This was made possible by Richard and Jeanette Tabella, which grew up and basically were raised here in Southeast Kansas before moving on to things up in the city. Work took Richard up there. He was a very successful businessman with the Hallmark Corporation, and having no children, this was kind of their lasting legacy. Jeanette, by trade, was a librarian herself and very passionate about lifelong learning and knew the importance of libraries, especially being in small rural communities. So we're very gracious to them for their generosity. But the beauty in this donation was there was no stipulations of how we built the place. So we wanted to kind of think of, what does a library look like today? We could have just threw up a metal building, put some bookshelves in there and called it good. But we really wanted to make it into a community hub, all the while paying tribute to our unique cultural and coal mining history here. So that's exactly what we did. Designing the museum, it is a museum in every sense, but more than a museum that would attract people from all over the state of Kansas or all over the nation. It means so much to people locally because it's not only a museum, it's like opening up your family photo album, if you will. It means even more to us because the coal mining industry isn't here anymore, but it brought all of us here. My ancestors came here for coal mining. Everybody around that table right there, their families came here to Southeast Kansas for coal mining. And that's all we have left of that. And with small towns, your history is your identity. And if we forget that, and if we don't pass that history on to that next generation, sadly it dies. So we wanted to try to recreate what life was like here in Southeast Kansas in those peak coal mining years. And we feel like we've done that through Heritage Hall. So our visitors have the opportunity to walk through our streets, if you will, and kind of see some of those structures that would have been present during our peak coal mining years, or even I guess it'd be like the late 1800s. Frontinac was founded in 1886 with the sinking of mine number 1. And we kind of designed it intentionally so as visitors walk in the front door, the first building that they see is the Santa Fe Depot, because as immigrants would have came into Frontinac by train or streetcar from Pittsburg or wherever they were traveling in from. This would have been the first building that they laid eyes on coming into town. Frontinac was just like every other coal camp in the sense that we had mercantiles and restaurants and churches and schools. We've always been a very vibrant community who's very passionate about preserving its history and telling our story. Beyond the depot, you can walk into Frontinac's bakery, which is still baking bread in the same oven since 1904. You can visit the Palooka's grocery storefront, which has been selling Italian food and groceries to the Frontinac and surrounding area since 1909. If you go through the doors of our coal miners union hall, you're inside our coal mining collection, where you can take information about the Amazon Army, which you learned a little bit about this morning. Also, the 1888 explosion, Frontinac's coal mining disaster, still the worst in coal mining history here in Kansas. Jerry did a wonderful job presenting that this morning as well. We really wanted to pass on mining to the youngest in our community. So we even created a small coal mining tunnel for kids to crawl through that gives them the experience of the confined workspace that their ancestors had to work in. Because kids have no idea, the trials and tribulations that they had to go through. And I tell everybody this, but I can't get my kids to take out the trash, let alone go work in the coal mines. So for them to actually have to sit, in this dark little confined tunnel about 3 or 4 foot tall, and I always assure them that, even though there's carpet in the mining tunnel, there was not carpeting in our mines. It was dark, it was damp, and this was before the 8-hour workday, so they were down there a very long time working in those conditions. And to kind of pay tribute to Linda and Jerry's talk earlier about our cultural diversity here, even though there was a lot of diversity here, you didn't ever see any scuttle or violence between the different ethnicities. Sure, the Italians may argue with one another, or the French may argue with one another, but there wasn't any violence or anything between the different cultures. Everybody was very respectful, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that when you were 100 foot underground, It didn't matter what color or what nationality that man right next to you was. That was your lifeline. That was your brother underground. And they were neighbors, and they attended church together. They sat in the same pews. Their kids were in the same classroom together. And we try to tell that story through Frontinac Heritage Hall. The last piece that I'll leave you is kind of the history of our school system, which also kind of goes back to our coal mining roots. Because we were one of the larger coal camps in the area, it was definitely a necessity that we start our own public school system. And in 1917, the first superintendent of Frontinac schools, Lauren Stiles Binkley, wrote a pretty good sized book on what our school system was doing to Americanize our citizens. Because unlike areas throughout the United States where you may have diversity, but maybe it's just like 2 or 3 different cultures, we truly were a melting pot here because of all the immigrants that came into Southeast Kansas. So if you can imagine, I'm sure there's some teachers and educators out here. If you had a classroom of 25 kids and each one of them speak a different language, how do you teach them? And especially in 1917, what did that look like? We didn't have the technology today where you could use Google Translate. They had to really get creative. So our education process looked different in Frontinac. They based things off play, individualized education. And they basically took that model and they put it into book form to show America that it can be done. And we were doing it right here in Southeast Kansas. So if you guys like to read, look that up. There's still copies floating around out there. But that's one thing that we like to really showcase in the museum as well. Even though the museum is very Frontinac focused, anybody that has grown up here in Southeast Kansas can relate to this because all of our coal mines and coal camps were very similar. We all have school systems, churches, mercantiles, everything that you need to have a town run. So even though you're not from Frontinac, one can definitely relate to that. With us all having a very similar background, it's just something that we're all proud to be a part of here, and we like to tell our story. If you guys haven't had a chance to come in, please come see us. I'd love to be able to show you around and answer any questions that you guys may have. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Phyllis Bitner. And Phyllis is the chairman of the Miners Hall Museum at Franklin. Any ideas of on the tour yesterday saw. Phyllis has deep roots in the Kansas Balkins. She's a very well respected local historian, extensively involved in innumerable civic, cultural, and historic affairs here. She's been instrumental in the founding of the Miners Hall Museum at Franklin. She obtained a Smithsonian exhibit that was held here. She obtained the National Register designation for the Arma Franklin sidewalk, and that's just to name a few of the things that she's accomplished here. Currently, she's involved in bringing the Page drag line to Franklin, as those of you that were on the tour noted yesterday. So this Southeast Kansas gym will give an introduction to the Miners Hall Museum at Franklin. So please welcome Phyllis.
Thank you, Jerry. It's nice to see all of you again, those of you that came to the museum yesterday. So I'm going to give you just a little background, and some of you will have heard some of this, and I know without a speaker, or yesterday without a microphone, it was difficult to hear some of this, but I'm going to give you a little background on us and how we began. We actually began through the force of Mother Nature. In 2003, an F4 tornado came through the community of Franklin. It was considered F4 because it took everything but the highway. The highway was the only thing left. If it had gotten the highway, it would have been considered an F5. So that destroyed much of the community. And so we did some rebuilding. We built a community hall, and through time we had events there and that type of thing. in the middle of all that, there have been a lot of people, myself included, Linda, several of the people that are here that are associated, that have talked in the past about a mining museum, an actual museum dedicated to the mining industry. So as things kind of dwindled down in Franklin at the community hall, people moved away, passed on, and that type of thing, we decided to form a nonprofit called Miners Hall Museum Foundation, and we merged with the Franklin group, which was Franklin Community Council, and decided to create the museum, which meant we also inherited the Franklin Community Park. It meant we inherited another piece of property, which now will be known as Dragline Park, which some of you that were on the tour saw yesterday. So we own 3 pieces of property in Franklin, which is a little town of, it's actually a village, is what it's called, of about 200 residents. So it's kind of amazing that we've had a Smithsonian exhibit in this little tiny community, and that we have what we think is a successful museum. The community park is used by people from all around southeast Kansas. So kind of like everyone's talking about here, and we try to tell people, when you come to our museum, we have some magnificent displays. We have beautiful tools, coal mining tools. We have a small drag mine in Inslee on display. We have coal buckets and all kinds of equipment. But we do more than tell just the story of the tools, and that's what we invite people to come. We are telling the story of the people who use those tools, who created those tools, all of those stories. The people part of it is what's important to us, and we want to share that with all of you. And those that are interested in tools, that's wonderful. You're going to see some remarkable tools. So within the last couple of weeks, we received a beautiful donation of some engineering tools, and I don't even know what they all are. Now, there's a transit and several other things. And not being in that industry, I see them and wow, they're beautiful. They're beautiful. And I think of the ingenuity it took for someone to design those before AI, before computers, before anything. Someone thought that up. They took a pencil and paper and they drew out those plans and designed that piece of equipment. So that's on display now. We do have most of those out there. But it's not just that. It's the story that goes with it. Who used that equipment? Where did they use it? How was it used? So that's a real important part of our museum. We like to tell the entire story that goes with just the coal mining industry and the tools. So you've heard about the Page walking drag line that we have coming. And I will apologize again that it was not on site yesterday. We had anticipated it would be here for you to see. Those of you that were on the tour saw the big boom, the lumper boom, and the bucket was on site, but they're in the process still of moving the actual cab and the rest of the equipment. But the story of who created that is fascinating. His name is John W. Page. He created the Page Engineering Company. He designed and built the walking drag line. Because of the internet, we have made contact with his great-granddaughters. They have sent us all kinds of artifacts and stories about him, and we're learning he was a magnificent man. He was brilliant. He had hundreds of patents. He designed and built all kinds of equipment, had a very successful company. So there's that story while this piece of equipment, so the equipment is a Page 618 walking drag line. And there were 18 built ever. There are 2 in existence. One is in a field with trees growing up through it. It's probably just a parts machine. Ours will be the only one preserved for public display. In addition, it will be the largest walking drag line preserved in the United States. And it will be only one of 2. And there are only 5 on the entire North American continent. So it's a very unique piece of equipment that we hope you will all come back and see, since we weren't able to show it to you yesterday. But if you came to the museum, or if you haven't been yet, we invite you to come and see our display. We have a special exhibit right now going on about the Page, and you can see pictures of this piece of equipment. It's really remarkable and interesting. So, and we're telling that story of Mr. Page and of the invention and all of the other things that he has done. Then you add on to more people's stories. The Wilkinson Coal Company. That was a small coal company in Weir, Kansas, and that is who owned this piece of equipment and donated it to our museum. So we have their story to tell, which is interesting. They came from England and that whole story. So people who visit the museum, we hear that most of all from everyone. They love hearing the stories that go with all of the things that we have on display. So sometimes you'll go into a museum and there might be a little tag and then say donated by, or this is a lunch bucket. Well, that doesn't tell you much. We want to know about whose lunch bucket that was, or what did they do, where did they work, and what was their family story. So, you know, we hope you'll find those kind of things interesting. And we're on social media, we're on Facebook, we have a website, and we post regularly a lot. Dave is wonderful to post all of our programs and anything like that. He has a YouTube channel, we share those. So if you follow us, you can learn a lot about this, and he's following along on the page as it's moving. We have a fellow taking drone footage. There'll be a video made of the move of that equipment because everyone can't be here, but we have people waiting from the East and West Coast who want to come on the day it is moved. They're already making plans to come. So, but if you can't make it, you'll be able to see it on Dave's YouTube channel. I'm sure he'll be following along with all of that. So, those are, like I say, the community park. Those of you that came yesterday were pretty proud about the park. It is used, it's a free park, community park for everyone. And kind of like Jerry, I think you were talking about, and Seth too, about the community in Franklin. It was the same way. So the Slovenes, we kind of lived at the west end. The Italians lived at the south end. There were some Belgians up here in the northeast. But in the center of town was the community hall. The Catholic Church was in the center of town. That's where we all came, and no one cared if you were Italian, Slovene, Belgian, what you were. Everyone got along. Like you say, there was not, no crosswords said, perhaps amongst ourselves, but like you say, everyone, gathered in the center of town, and we were all there, glad to be Americans, and sharing whatever it was on that particular day, and we learned about the miners, about what a horrific job that was. And I think that our board seems to be fueled by passion, and I think most of us all, anyone who has an interest in history, you have a passion about something. Mine is, my dad went to work in the mines when he was 12. Well, gosh, that sounds so sad, but that was common. That's not unusual. That you hear that a lot in a lot of stories. And I think of my grandchildren, I can't envision one of them at 12 going down early in the morning in that deep, dark mine and not coming out till, the end of the day. It's just heartbreaking to even think that that was a possibility. So that passion, I think, fuels all of us to keep telling all of these stories about the miners. And yet they found joy in their lives. When we talk about the community center, when I think of the photos, many of these were buildings were gone when I was growing up, but there were dance hall, there were bars, there were social clubs, there was an SMPJ lodge, there was an Italian lodge, so they gathered and music was an important part of their lives, and of course we talk about the bootlegging, but they found joy in their lives, even though it was just horrific conditions that they were working in, and family was important to them. So that's just a part of our bigger story. So if you weren't there yesterday on the tour, we invite you to come back. We invite you to follow us on Facebook. It's just Miners Hall Museum. And if you come back to Southeast Kansas, we'd like for you to come and visit with us. We love seeing you all and sharing our story. And thank you all for coming to Southeast Kansas. We've had a great time. We hope you all have had as much fun as we've had. We just really, yesterday was a lot of fun spending the day with all of you. So thank you all for having us here today and for coming out to see us. Thank you.
Thanks, Phyllis. The next speaker is Bob Zagonel. Bob is board member for the Crawford County Historical Museum, which is just on the west side of Pittsburgh here. Unfortunately, on the tour yesterday, we didn't have time to stop by there, but they also have a major mining element to that museum as well. Bob is also the owner of Chicken Annie's Drawer. The fried chicken places here are a specialty of the Balkins, and he's certainly a member of that, you know. So he's going to tell you a little bit about how that came about. Chicken Annie's is a cultural icon in this area. He'll present an introduction here to the Crawford County Historical Museum here in Pittsburgh. So please welcome Bob.
It's gonna be a tough crowd to follow. Before we get to work, we had to have our safety equipment. We got to get our hat. We got to get our mine light on, our carbide lamp to go to work. And the other part was the miner's bucket. You had to have your lunch. That was the important part, is getting to work. Welcome to Southeast Kansas. At one time, the coal capital of the country. I am Robert Zagonel, board member with the Crawford County Historical Museum in Pittsburg, Kansas. My great-grandparents immigrated to the area for the dream of a better future that the coal fields offer. Our museum helps tell some of that story. The display case with the tools of the trade that would have been chosen, from the picks to the drills to the carbide lamps. We have a life-size display of the average room, as it was called, that they would have worked in. Most coal seams in our area were 3 foot or less, which meant most of the work was done on your knees. As with most of us, some days I'm sick of going to work, but I can't imagine getting excited about going to work in the mines. Going down to a small area and working on my hands and knees with a light, not much more energy than a candle. As time went on, because of the dangers of deep shaft mining and the industrial age of machinery, strip mining became the new standard. Steam shovels or drag lines were used to remove the overburden so the coal could be mined. As we have on display, we have a 1924 Marion Model 37 steam shovel. Originally shipped and used in the Detroit area, it was purchased by the Wilkinson's Coal Company and moved to the fields of Cherokee County in 1935. And was in use until 1953. Thanks to the Wilkinson family, it was moved to the museum, restored and maintained, and as far as we know, it's the last surviving Marion Model 37 Nutt. As the mines flourished, the camp towns created by them became the center of people's lives from many different areas and became known as the Little Balkins. We have a restored one-room schoolhouse that was typical of many of the camp towns. We also have a one-room grocery store that was an important part of the camp towns. Our museum has a meeting room that is used by many in the community. We have a number of events each year, including in the May, we have the Cowboy Days. In June, we have Wacky Wednesdays for the kids. July, we have car show. September, we have the Civil War reenactment. October, we have gas engine and tractor club show, and also a safe trick-or-treat for Halloween. We have a variety of items, from the Pierce ladder fire truck to the stagecoach, from a horse-drawn hearse to a restored Pepsi delivery truck, from a Civil War cannon to the display of the 1968 Miss America from Kansas. From farming exhibits to a two-headed calf, unlock the past with a visit to the Crawford County Museum. I also would like to share a little story. As you see, I'm advertising for Chicken Annie's. But I'd share a little history about the area. As you notice, as you travel around, that we have many variety of chicken restaurants. As life began for Charlie and Annie Pickler, Charlie worked in the mine, and he raised the 3 children in their 3-room house, a mine shack. Sometimes it's hard to explain to people that it was just 3 rooms. A lot of people keep putting 3-bedroom in it. It was no 3 bedrooms. It was a living room, a bedroom, and a kitchen. But as they went along, in 1933, they lived in Camp 13, which is Yale, Kansas. He was injured in the mine when a coal car came down and crushed his legs. One of them had to be amputated. In those days, of course, there was no disability, and with depression still being felt, there was not much choice for work anyway. Annie turned to what she knew and began serving sandwiches and homebrew, as we talked about, as it was prohibition, but they always found a way to make the wine, the whiskey, or the homebrew. And then for the special meals, she made fried chicken. By 1934, that became the staple. As she served out of their house, eventually they added an extra room on, and then another room, and then another room. And finally, in 1972, they built a new building with a seating capacity over 300 people, still in Yale, Kansas. The neighbors faced similar challenges with her husband working in the mine, so they began to serve food out of their house. In 1942, Chicken Mary's began. The Sunday dinner of chicken became a tradition of the area, with others following. The Gibhards started in 1946, the Bardos in 1951, Picklers in 1970, and Chicken A's with Gerard in 1971. All are still operating today. The hardships of the mining era created a chicken tradition that is still family operated for over 90 years. Annie Pickler was my great aunt. My family has operated the Gerard location for 42 years, which is located in Ringo, Kansas, the coal camp, and it was a central mine, number 48. Once again, thank you for letting us tell our story. We hope you come back and visit. If you have any questions, we all try to answer anything we can, and we appreciate everybody. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And I'll tell you, you never have eaten fried chicken unless you eat it at one of those places that you just mentioned. Next, we have J.T. Knoll. J.T. was a well-known counselor in our area here. He is a prodigious writer, a poet, and musician. J.T. is another iconic figure in Southeast Kansas culture. He has been twice awarded first place as a columnist by the Kansas Press Association and has published in numerous journals while writing original poetry and songs. He will present us with some of these poems and songs. Please welcome J.T.
Another thing Chicken Eddie's did was it introduced a lot of couples who got married, like Linda and me. Worked our way through high school there. Chicken Eddie's 13, yeah, what he was talking about. We double check with the code and change it. Good enough for this group. My great-great-grandfather, John Lewis Knoll, immigrated here from Bavaria in the late 1800s and happened to be one of the men who survived that mine disaster at Frontinac that's been talked about. He later died in Clemens 18, east of Pittsburg. Before he died, though, he would go every couple days to see if his new first grandson was born, which would be my dad, by my grandpa Matt. And the day before my dad was born, he got killed in Clemens 18. So my Grandpa Matt lost a father and gained a son within a couple of days. This song is called the Ballad of Matt Knoll. It talks about it. He gets up in the morning, goes to work each day, comes back home in the evening, never has much to say. The very next day it's the same thing, day after the same. He just keeps on working, never does he turn away. Even though he's down in the coal mine, scuffling on his hands and knees, the carbide lamp is only sunshine, dreaming of his sweet Marie. Lost his father in a cave, another died by his side. The very next day he had a son born. Funny how birth and death collide. The funeral was a sad goodbye. Amazing grace that it sang. Took his baby to their church farm, stood and cried at the christening. Next day he's back in the coal mine, scuffling on his hands and knees. Carbide lamp is only sunshine, dreaming of his sweet Marie. Saturday nights he drinks a little bootleg, circles round to a polka beat in a local immigrant dance hall outside town near a field of wheat. And then Sunday morning grabs a cane pole, goes off to fish and be alone. On the way back sings an old song in his German baritone. Monday morning he's back in the coal mine, scuffling on his hands and knees. Carbide lamp is only sunshine, dreaming of his sweet Marie. You heard the word bootleg. We've heard homebrew or bootlegger. Frontinac, you've heard that name a lot. We were champion bootleggers. I want you to know that. We had all the way to Chicago. They called it Deep Shaft. Was that Frontinac bootleg whiskey? In fact, I talked to a man named Charlie Cicero, who had the Frontinac press and became postmaster. I interviewed him years ago, and he said, "JT, I don't think people would have stayed alive without bootlegging." Between the mines being down and the Depression. There's a story about a man around that time drove in Frontinac and saw a young boy about 12 years old, said, "Hey son, you know where I can buy some bootleg whiskey here in town?" He says, "Why, yeah, about any place but the post office." Miners in these parts sometimes call one another diggers. You know, there's a digger from over 13 Yale, a digger from Bradley, and a digger from over at Dunkirk, married that digger's wife from over in Frontinac, that Diamond girl. My grandpa, by the way, I call it the Republic of Frontinac because we're pretty iconoclastic. They're very like, we're kind of a city-state as we grew up there. The thing about my grandpa is after he got out of the mine, I was just the right age to hang out with. So I'm like 10 or 11. He's out of the mine now, but he never stopped digging. He was digging anything. This little prose poem I wrote called Digging. I want to do a shout out to Seamus Haney, who's an Irish poet who wrote a similar poem about his father digging sod over in Ireland. He went a different direction with it about writing than I did, but that's where I got the idea. Digging. I could hear the clean rhythmic sound of his sharpshooter, that 16-inch blade, ash and steel handle, easing down into clay, his straining back in a deep hole, descending to a sewer line or water main, or out back in the garden with a long-handled shovel, stooping and standing in rhythm, boot on steel, wood on knee, the blade sliding in, arms levering, dark earth up and over, digging. Grandpa could handle a shovel. He consistently dug more coal in a day than any other man in any of the southeast Kansas mines he worked. And following that, he dug graves for horses, footings for buildings, troughs for water, sewer and gas lines, gardens for grandma, and deep ditches in search of broken sewer pipes, heaving sod and clay and rock to one side or over his shoulder, going down, 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 digging. He smiled and whistled. When digging narrow trenches for new gas lines near our house, it happened to be standing and shoveling above ground in clean air, rather than on hands and knees 150 feet down in foul, dark air, picking and shoveling coal from a 3-foot seam. An easy and confident way, he carried his tools, that long-handled shovel, sharpshooter pick, and double-bladed axe from the bed of his pickup truck to the plumb line to set about his work, digging. The moist smell of new earth, the grass and thump of clay, the slice of edge through roots, the economy of motion, sewer line, water line, gas line, grave, garden, ditch, digging. We have some presentations about strip mining and mine reclamation. That Grasshopper Corner was up there earlier. That's a place that we used to go out, and then just a little bit north of there was more strip pits. We didn't care about reclamation. We wanted to go out there to go swimming and fishing and pick blackberries. So the reclamation, I'm sure, helped a lot of people later. But back in the day, people thought our land was denuded. We didn't think it was denuded. We thought it was a playground. We didn't find out later that it got denuded. So Grandpa, nature takes over pretty quick, like always. So I would go fishing with him, and this is a story of one day when he came to pick me up. I was lazily reading a Superman comic book in my treehouse one July morning when I heard the unmistakable rattle and roar of Grandpa Matt's 52 Chevy pickup pulling in our drive. With my eyes closed, I listened intently for the familiar yank on the door level, followed by the squeak of the springs as he slid out of the cab, then the sound, a unique combination of metallic clang and a low-frequency thump, the pickup door slamming shut. Through the catalpa leaves and beans, I watched him hustle past our fruit-laden apple tree and climb the steps to the back porch. He looked happy. As I turned to descend, I caught a fleeting glimpse of the truck bed. I was almost halfway down, though, when I realized what I'd seen. Fishing poles. I seen fishing poles. I dropped the last feet to the ground and ran headlong for for the house where I met Grandpa coming down the back steps.
JT,
He exclaimed, I was looking for you to see if you want to go fishing. I finished the sentence with him. Sure, I'll get my old shoes.
got any worms?
Yeah, I dug some in the slough behind Mrs. Brackett's a couple days ago. I've been putting old coffee grounds on them like you showed me, Grandpa.
Good. You see the fish barometer today?
No. I responded before slipping into my old shoes at the back step and running into the half light of the garage to peer at the 7-Up bottle and burned it in an old mason jar filled with water. Wow, I'd never seen it like that,
Me neither.
he said. Cupping my hands around my eyes to cut the glare, I leaned against the back screen and announced, Mom, I'm going fishing with Grandpa Mac. She called back her consent without missing a beat, her rhythmic transfer of clothes from washer to clothes basket. I grabbed the sawworms from the garage, ran to the truck, and stood on the running board to swing them into the back of the pickup. There I spied a water jug, gunny sack, minnow bucket, 3 cane poles, and Grandpa's ever-present immense scoop shovel. Then it was north, out of town, toward the strip pits. As we rumbled down the dusty, brown, dirt road, Grandpa began to exuberantly sing in his deep baritone. I found the horseshoe. I found the horseshoe. I picked it up and nailed it on the door. It was rusty and full of nail holes, and it brought good luck to me forevermore.
Come on, JT, sing.
He gleefully ordered.
Tring-a-ling-a-ling-a, tring-a-ling-a-ling-a, tra-la-la-la.
Tring-a-ling-a-ling, tring-a-ling-a-ling, tra-la-la-la.
Tring-a-ling-a-ling-a, tring-a-ling-a-ling-a, tra-la-la-la. As I played on my Spanish guitar.
It was a holy sound. My Grandpa and me singing out of that old truck as we rumbled along, trailing a diaphanous plume of brown canvas dust. Suddenly, he slammed on the brakes while simultaneously reaching over to stop my headlong lurch. Look! Blackberries! In a flash, he had rummaged behind the seat, found his old mining bucket, and run to the ditch, to the blackberry patch where he began to pick frantically. In the absolute quiet, I heard the sweet, sacred sound that my older brother John would eloquently describe years later in his yearning poem, Echo. I want to hear juicy blackberries plop into an old tin bucket.
Got enough for a pie.
Grandpa proudly said as he slid back into the cab and tossed me a berry. At the strip pits, Grandpa unleashed the cane poles, 2 13-footers for him and a 10-footer for me, and we loaded up the gear and followed him, and I followed him into the overgrown path that led us to the water. We fished in fits and starts because Grandpa was not a patient angler. 5 or 10 minutes in one spot was usually enough to either pull a few perch, bluegill, or bass from the clear water, give up, and move over the dirt dumps into another hole. After a couple hours, he noticed I was getting hot and tired and sunburned.
Let's take 5, JT.
He pronounced as he set the pole, led me to the shade where he pulled some beef jerky and 2 gooey Hershey bars from a fishing box. Then he walked back to the water's edge, scooped up a generous handful of mud, and returned to gently rub it on my sunburned skin as I ate. We lay on our backs, looking together at the immense Kansas sky before finally packing up our gear and head back to the truck. Grandpa led the way, water jug and gunny sack full of panfish in one hand, cane poles in the other. I followed along with the fishing box and minnow bucket. That night, as I lay on my bottom bunk thinking about my day, our giant window fan drawing the cool night air over my burning arms and face, I began to sing softly to myself. I found a horseshoe. I found a horseshoe. I picked it up and nailed it on the door. Thank you.
Great, you want to take some questions?
Do we have time for quick?
Class first.
Well, my question is this, and it's to all of the museum people. The coal mining ended in the early 1700s in the area. Yes, but there are still people around who did the work. Here.
Could you repeat your question? I can't hear you over here.
What I'm asking is about the people who are still here, who worked in the coal mines, and about whether museums are doing any sort of memory collection or like doing interviews with these people and like trying to record the intangible cultural heritage as well as this tangible in the form of items.
Thank you. Probably got more than one answer to this. I know that.
I'll just say that we've been collecting those interviews for almost 40 years, in some degree or another. But there are a lot of our miners and families that are no longer with us. So you are getting memories even from their children, and sometimes their memories aren't as as solid as their ancestors are. I mean, they don't have, if they haven't worked in the mine, or have experience even living with someone who has, like maybe a grandparent, it's a whole different kind of story that they give. Mostly is what they remember is their fathers or their grandfathers coming home with something a little bit in their bucket so they can eat it, and that was just their way, like a communion of them having an opportunity to say you made it through another day. And that's, the memories are really start there. Or the stress, of living sometimes when protests and strikes were going on, there wasn't enough money in houses that were basically shacks where they had to pretty much wallpaper their homes with newspapers because they couldn't even afford anything else. And there was a lot of that kind of stress on them daily if they were actually working family with the mine. The grandchildren and those on have a different, almost a little bit more sentimental and romantic view of, and I certainly did. I grew up with a grandfather from Austria who worked 40 years in a mine, who lived in Franklin. He came over here at 17, and he was not hurt. He worked all the way until his 60s. And, the stories I heard and their relationships with their neighbors, it was pleasant. They were glad to, as my grandmother said in her late 90s, I'm glad to be alive.
One aspect that we've not really heard about was the black coal miners that came in this area, and we do have a speaker tomorrow that's going to address that. But after the strikes in 1893 and 1899, the coal companies went down to Alabama and imported black miners here to break the strikes that was going on. They weren't even informed that they were going to be strike breakers, so you can imagine what that was like when they got here. And the coal companies actually had to build stockades around the mines to protect those black coal miners. But it didn't take very long, and they wised up and they joined the union as well. So, For my grandfather came from Slovenia in 1902, and he had worked in the mines in Slovenia and in the Ruhr Valley in Germany, and then came here. And he died in 1949. And in 1969, my grandmother passed away, and at her wake, there was a black man came in and talked to my father, and he said, I want to be sure and be here, because Matt Lomshek always treated me the same as everybody else. So that was kind of a proud moment, for me.
Yeah, for me, being the age that I am, my grandpa worked for Pittsburg Midway Coal Company and did a lot of the restoration on Big Brutus. He was crazy enough to hang on at the very top doing the welding during the restoration process. He obviously doesn't have the same fear of heights that I do. But hearing all of his stories growing up, my ancestors coming from southern Italy and Switzerland over here working the mines, it's just something I grew up hearing those stories, and I continue to absorb those so I can pass those on to the next generation as well. As far as Heritage Hall Museum goes, thankfully to JT's work, we have a lot of the oral histories documented that we looked at on our iPads. Some of them are already on there, but there's more to be uploaded. And then in the coming weeks, I'm working with McKay Street Coffee House, which some of you guys got to enjoy yesterday. Brad Stefani, longtime Frontinac, is going to be working with me, and we're going to do some podcasts, trying to get some of the older folks in town that have direct ties to coal mining, telling their family stories, and using that as a way to document our history as well. So a lot of cool things to come still.
If I might add, go ahead.
As far as current miners that actually work in the mines from the strip mining, there's still a few of those left here. For those of you that were down at Brutus, there was 2 of those there at that time. That was Jimmy Lovell and Carmen Bocci. So there's a few of those still left.
Something really unique to this area that we find, and you've seen it at the Miners Hall all the time, is this area was more greatly populated when there were mining going on here. And there was a lot of people, families that came here from Europe or other places, and they moved on. And so I live in the little town of Weir that's 600 people. There are people all over the country who know Weir, Kansas, because at the time there were 10,000 people that lived near Weir, Kansas, and used that as their business center. So there are people that come back to this area now whose ancestors came through here, and they tell their stories, and they want to know what happened to their, how they came here, how they came to be here, and how they came to be where they are, and what happened to their parents and grandparents. The woman came to Miners Hall and wrote that book called Sinkhole. It was an amazing story, but that phenomena of people from all over the country wanting to know how their ancestors came to be here and how they came to be where they are.
There's another recent book that is written that was from a descendant of the coal miners here, and his name is James Toasting, and the name of the book is Crow Omen, and that's just been published, and it's a historic novel, but excellently written, and includes a number of events that actually happened here. So if you get a chance to read that, I suggest you do. The other thing, to follow up on what Dave was just talking about, last year there was a black family. Most of them lived up in Kansas City. We were descended from black coal miners at Weir, and their ancestor was a little more educated, and he was kind of a leader for the black community there in Weir. And they were going to have a family reunion here, so they asked me to research that family, and so I did, and it was really an illustrious family. And when they came down, there were 60 people here from virtually all over the country that were descendants from that man.
And I'll just piggyback to what Linda said also, because we're both on the board of the Miners Hall Museum. We have a research library within our museum. So in addition to preserving those stories digitally, we also are printing, having them transcribed and printed and placed in the library so people, and they're all the books are all indexed, so if Jack Smith is talking about John Jones, you can still look up that family name and find them in another book. And people love it. We have people that spend hours upon hours, and people who don't even realize that they have, as Chris was saying this morning, Chris Childers, that he was shocked when he came in and found his great-grandfather's name in one of our books. So we're preserving it that way also as well, in addition to the digital.
Can I say something?
Let me take the mic out.
Yeah.
I can yell.
Then he's right after you.
You can be first.
I have two questions, so I'm not going first before you do that. Two questions, both about Missouri. From your community and family histories, does that ever include the mines around Minden mines, the coal mines across the border? Or is that considered something separate? Second question, same community family histories. What kind of stories circulate about the lead and zinc miners in the tri-state district? Because I know some of the stories from the tri-state district about coal miners, but I'm interested in the reverse perspective.
I'm not aware of any connection there with any of the miners from the zinc area, which is kind of amazing. You know, halfway across the county is where that occurred, and yet there was little connection other than them bringing ore up here to be smelted.
But any stories about them, any kind of attitudes or presumptions?
No, not that I've heard of. Not that I've heard of. The first question was...
Minden mines, coal mines?
Oh, Minden mines, yeah. Yeah, we had still quite a bit of information about the miners at Minden mines and also up through Rich Hill, that whole area. It was just an extension of this coal field going into Missouri, and so, yeah, we do have some information about that.
The same kind of miners, same origins?
Yeah, not as many immigrants over there. The immigrants were more here in Crawford and Cherokee counties. There was some there around Minden mines, but past that there wasn't much, I don't think.
One of the ways that we connected with tri-state area was through a documentary. PBS Ozark did a documentary about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, included all of us, in the entire tri-state area. That was really wonderful because we had a connection there. We could see, and we learned so much from that documentary. But they included all of us. And you can still get it on YouTube, I think.
Louis Castelletto, by the way, it hasn't been mentioned, was the main force behind getting the memorial there in Pittsburg, Immigrant Park in Pittsburgh. I think somebody went by there where they had the wonderful sculpture of the miner coming home from work. I want to give a shout out to Louis. Back to your question, Claude. Louis started a movement to get stories about the coal miners that started coming in, and because I had a newspaper column, I started publishing in my column, and then they ended up in a book that they have over at the Miners Hall Museum. So we've collected those all in print, and once in a while I rerun it. Last week, since you guys were coming to town, I reran one called Coal Miners' Daughters. It never fails. I get emails. Thank you so much for running that, and they start talking about their experience with their father, it just feeds on itself. But there is, sadly, and who's the Palazzari? Who do we have the tape of? Perugia Palazzari. We have some tape of them talking directly about that got converted from probably cassette tape into digital now, so we have some direct.
Yeah, it sounds like you have some good collection.
I just want to add to that Louis Castelletto was the one that designed this map up here of the coal fields. that is a real resource for all of us to use. Yeah.
Bill Powell.
Yeah.
Bill Powell.
Yeah, Bill Powell as well. He taught here at the university for years, and his thesis was on the coal mining area here. His doctoral thesis was on that, and so he had done a lot of research as well. The importance of this map is that they tried to identify every coal mine, the major coal mines. It was in the area, so if you look closely at the map, you'll see numbers all over here, and those are all mines, and then it lists most of the coal camps as well on that map.
Maybe Sarah DeCaro will have something to say, add to that from special collections. She's doing a talk later in the conference.
I was just going to say, Mining History Association has a website. A lot of people put things onto it, and you guys ought to take advantage of that resource. You know, because there's a lot of inquiries that come in, just like you're talking about. I'm living in San Diego, my father, grandfather, great-grandfather was a miner here or there. And it's another source to connect, that's all I'd like to say.
Mike, did you have a question? We got just a couple more minutes, 3:15.
We'll put one around here, who answers it, but as you drive around through all the area, really on the tour yesterday, and ad hoc on my own, I noticed a lot of cemeteries out along some of the areas. I was wondering, all the ones that I noticed were well maintained, and I was wondering if there was any kind of cemetery laws in Kansas that require anybody to maintain or preserve cemeteries?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks for the compliment. But you know, there's no law, it's just that the people here are committed to doing that, you know. And if a cemetery starts looking raggedy, somebody's gonna get in trouble. You know, because they are well taken. To build on what you said, some of Linda's relations from Mississippi, just outside Memphis, came through, and I said, "What do you think of the area?" She said, "Oh, it's clean. You know, it's like there's no trash around in the road." And there's a tremendous sense of pride, you know, in all these little towns about keeping your town up and taking good care. You know, put a coat of paint on it, take care of it. All the time growing up. I was asked years ago when I was working here, I got a couple degrees from here, and I was gone to a conference, kind of like this, only in my area with student health. And a guy in a workshop, he said, "I want you to write down what legacy immediately you were left with growing up." I saw a lot of people looking around. Work hard, take care of your neighbor. Simple.
I think that's a good way to end it.
I just want to add another thing, since we have a lot of folks in here. As you know, this is only my second time here, southeastern Kansas. I will say one thing: you drive around, you know, I'm a city slicker, but you drive around and see huge tracts of land. People have either cattle or other things, but they maintain the lawns. Acres of lawns, and you know that's been a shock to me. I would let something go back to nature. Kudos to
You know, it's interesting, JT. I started a gravestone cleaning project at my college in
Arkansas?
Yeah, Northwest Arkansas. And there are a lot of them that work are involved in the team. And yet there are some that are. But I think it's a great tribute to the community.
It is, and we have, it's like, go ahead. We have community groups, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that also at the museum and at other sites, we have a record of every tombstone, everything that is written on the tombstone, in every cemetery.
You have 5 degree? You have it in 5 degree.
Oh, is it? No. Oh, I don't know. I think it is on Binder Grave, you're right. But we have that also in our research library. And I can't remember the gentleman's name that did that years ago, but he went to all cemeteries and noted everything that was on every
That was
Tuesday.
Cuthbertson, yeah.
Cuthbertson, yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that we have community organizations, youth groups, they go out and take on these kind of, like Jerry was talking about with the scout who took on the issue of finding out all the graves were for the mine disaster in Frontinac. And we have a lot of social groups, young and old, who decide, we're gonna get together, either contribute time or money to make sure we keep things up.
Let's give these wonderful folks a hand. If you haven't gotten to museums, you got to get to them before you go. They're awesome. I had a question that would take a long time, and it's how did you do all this? And most of it's volunteers, some of it you get endowments, you get public money. It is amazing what people do at museums. And the class knows all about that. All right, we've got about 10 minutes, 3:25, we'll start the next session. Go over there in that box and put money in it. Oh, excuse me. Sign your name and put it in there. We're going to draw those books later, and if you do want to throw some money or a check in there, it's for the research grant. So I want to remind you that. We'll be back at 3:25.